Well, good morning. Welcome to Keeping Pace. And normally Katie Willett introduces us, but she couldn't be here today. And normally we have Donna Finley with us, and normally we have Darla Pickett with us, but unfortunately for varying reasons they couldn't be here. But darn it, they're going to be back here next month. However, we do have somebody that we've been missing for, well, a few years now, as a matter of fact. Who was an integral part of Keeping Pace in the past, and now we've talked him into coming back. And his name is Jamie Doran, and I introduced Jamie Doran to my far left. And Jamie is going to introduce our special guest for the day.
And I'm happy to do that. Very pleased to say today our guest speaker is going to be Gordon Blavelt. And Gordon lives right in Madison, up at the top of Ellis Flats, restoring an old farmhouse. And I kind of connected with him through an interest in antique clocks. Happened to have one. I was on Craigslist and noticed that somebody right in my area repaired clocks, and gave him a call, and the friendship kind of blossomed, and so has my collection of clocks, actually. My wife blames him. So we're lucky to have Gordon here today, and he's brought in some different clocks to talk about, some really, really old clocks to some newer types, some wooden works, as well as some brass works on clocks. And guess where?
This is kind of a specialized business, isn't it, Gordon? I mean, how many antique clock repair people are there out here in Central Maine right now?
Well, I'm not sure. There are a few around. My father repaired clocks for more than 50 years, and that's how I got into it.
Okay.
And probably about 5 or 6 years ago, for some reason, I found an antique clock at an antique place and decided to buy it.
Yep.
And even though I've been around them my entire life, I never really saw much interest. Well, I brought it to my father and asked him about if he could repair it. And he said, sure, I could, but why don't you help me? Well, that's all it took, and I've been hooked ever since. So,
yeah. And I understand that not only do you know Jamie, but you know another member or two of our normal cast. Darla Pickett was telling me this morning that you were repairing a clock for her as well.
Yep, I was doing repairing a grandfather clock movement for her. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Done any work for Donna Finley?
I have not.
Yeah.
I don't think Donna has any clocks, but I do know she may be in need of a new kitchen stove.
Inside joke, folks. You don't do stove repairs, do you?
I do not. No, I do not. No.
Oh, sorry, Donna.
So how long have you been doing this?
Well, with my father working beside him about 5 years now.
About 5 years.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, do you have like a formal shop without an Ellis Flats or?
I don't. I'm doing the repairs out of my house at this point.
Okay.
I kind of have them scattered around the house, and that's basically where I'm doing it for now.
Is this like a full-time gig for you? Or?
It is not. I have a day job. I build furniture for a living,
Uh-huh.
and the clocks are kind of on the side, although
Okay.
I spend a fair amount of time doing it.
Okay.
Yeah, just you could do a show just on the furniture he makes, and I had asked Gordon about talking about that, and he said honestly he's so busy that bringing it up wouldn't be helpful. But
Which somehow I believe we just did.
yeah, I knew we'd get that in somehow, buddy.
So.
Now, sitting on either side of our table are a few of the antique clocks that you possess and maybe you're working on,
Mhm.
correct? And we've also got some, I don't know whether they're on camera or not, but off to my right-hand side as well. So you want to describe some of these clocks?
Sure. What I did was I brought in a small succession of the way clocks started out and not really ended, but so we have some of the older of the antique clocks and the most newest of what I would call the antique clocks. One of the clocks we have here today is what they call a column and splat clock, and it's newer than what they call a pillar and scroll. Pillar and scrolls was actually designed by Eli Terry, and they It was a Woodworks clock that, in other words, the movement itself was made out of wood.
Okay.
See, Jamie's bringing that
Jamie,
over now.
Jamie's going to help us with a show
I'll
and
stand
tell
up,
here.
because that's going to be in front of us.
There we go.
Thank you. And this is a Woodworks weight-driven clock, and this is what they call a transitional clock. The pillar and scroll would have been about 1918 to 1930, and then they would have started developing these as a change from one to another. And then this, we kept the next round of clocks, they kept the columns and the splat up here, but they were generally larger, taller clocks.
Yeah.
They didn't. Some of them have reverse paintings in the bottom in the door, and some of them were mercury-backed mirrors that were in there.
Wow.
So this clock happens to be in working condition, and if we open this up
My goodness.
and remove the hands, we can give a good view of how the clock operates. Now this is a Woodworks movement that's in here, and as you see, a lot of the gears, you can't really see inside, but the gears here are made out of wood. All the shafts are made out of wood. The only thing that's brass in here, brass or metal, is a suspension spring and rod and the escape wheel. And it's weight driven. There's weights in here that pull on string that operate the clock.
Now, Gordon, how hard is it to repair? And I don't actually own any Wooden Works clocks at my house, but how hard is it to repair a clock that has wooden works, like the gears or something? If they chip out, is it?
It's much more difficult than a brass. One of the things that you run into with a Woodworks clock a lot is that teeth get stripped off or broken out, or they come loose and they come apart, that type of thing, where you don't find that in the brass quite as much. Because they were making brass movements, and brass was so expensive that they went to wood, thinking it was a much cheaper alternative, and then back to brass at some point.
Okay.
So yes, these can be, they work on the same premise. They have the same similar parts in them, but they do tend to have more damage in them.
Okay.
What was the time frame that they started switching over from the Woodworks to the brass?
Well, that's a little bit difficult to say. A lot of your Woodworks were around 1920s, but you would find them even up in the 30s, 40s. But it depends on the maker. The larger makers tend to switch over, where your other makers that were doing a lot of one-offs, one at a time, the switchover took longer to do.
Where would they make these clocks?
A lot of them were made in New England. A lot of them were Connecticut, Massachusetts, those type of things.
Well, the incredible detail, the wood framing, the artistry work, all that stuff. I mean, I can only imagine what it would cost to build one of these today.
Yeah, I can't imagine with it, like I said, with the artistry that's involved, and yet at the time this clock was built, you were probably buying it for around $8.
$8, but $8
Was
a lot of money.
Was still
right?
a lot of money.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah.
What
That's
would
correct.
this clock be valued at now if it was in pristine condition? I mean, it's working.
It's probably, some of that depends on the maker, of course. Some of your more famous makers demand a little bit more money, but on average, I would say this clock in pristine condition is pretty close to a $400 clock today.
Nice.
Now, how accurate was it in terms of keeping time?
They're pretty accurate.
Yeah.
These weight-driven clocks tend to be a little more accurate than spring-driven clocks. And the idea behind that is your spring is fully wound. It has its most amount of power.
Yeah.
And as it unwinds and starts to lose power, they can lose a little time, although they are fairly accurate. But where your weight-driven clock has the same amount of weight from top to bottom. So
Okay.
they really, once they're dialed in, they keep pretty good time.
Pretty good time.
Yeah.
What I thought was neat was learning how to kind of get them so that they were more accurate. Want to tell the folks out there as far as how you can adjust, like if your clock at home, if you have an antique clock and it's running slow, or if it's running fast, what are some of the options to do without actually having to bring it to a clock repairman?
Sure. If you're, and that varies depending on clock and model. A lot of the clocks, if it's a pendulum styled clock, it'll have a nut at the bottom of the clock. And if your clock is running, of course this would be hanging on here, if your clock was running a little fast, you would turn the nut down to lower the bob. And that would slow the clock. If it was running a little slow, you turn the nut up to raise the bob, which would actually speed the clock up.
Interesting.
So it's a very minor adjustment, and it doesn't take much. Now, with this clock over here, the sessions, there's...
You want me to bring that
yeah,
over?
that would be great.
Hold on, folks. Whoops.
Well, it's
Okay,
chiming.
It's time
Chimes.
for tea.
It
Time
chimes.
for tea.
Yeah.
On the inside, when you open up the bezel, there's a little hole right here, which may be hard to see, but there's a square. And you would turn that, and there's an F and an S on the dial. And you would turn it towards the F if you want to speed your clock up, turn it to S for slow if you want to slow it down. So it varies a little bit. And
Yeah.
some clocks like this have both adjustments. The nut on the back of the bob is actually for a rough adjustment, and this is for very fine tuning.
Nice.
So if you want to change it over to daylight savings time, do you just do it manually? with
Yeah,
the
you would,
hand?
it would advance it to 1 hour,
Yeah.
or I would stop the clock and I would start it again at the correct time, rather than trying to go 11 hours around your clock.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, this clock here, the sessions you said this one is?
Yep.
I noticed this one has like a mental face, yeah, a metal face compared to some of the paper looking dials. What was the difference in those, and how come metal was used sometimes and sometimes paper? And was it like a time frame that they switched over, or?
Not really a time frame, and you mentioned paper, but this dial here is also wood.
Oh,
This is a hand-painted wood dial. So they
Wow.
did all kinds of variations of dials. I think a lot of it was maker preference. Sessions in particular, with this particular dial, this is called a silvered dial. And they silvered that dial at the factory, trying to enhance it, make it look a little more, well, shiny. They're trying
Wow.
to make it look like it was a more high-end clock.
Now, were these all these clocks made in one location, or was, say, the face or the artistry done one place and?
Oh,
and
that's a
brought-
good question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, they did have different. They had different locations.
Okay.
A lot of with your artistry work. Now this reverse painting is in fairly poor condition. A lot of it has started to come off.
Yeah.
Which is very common with clocks of this age.
Yeah.
Especially if they've been used or running. You know, you have to open this door every day to wind it, because this clock only runs for 30 hours.
Okay.
So opening and closing, and with heat changes, and the some of the painting starts to come off. But there was artists that specialized in the painting of dials and reverse painted glass, and they were hired by makers to do those
Wow.
certain things.
Were any of these clocks made in Maine, or are they all southern New England?
No, there was some Maine makers. And if I was pressed for a name, I probably wouldn't be able to come up with it. But I do have a grandfather clock. That's a Woodworks grandfather clock that was made by a maker in Bangor. And
Okay.
like I said, I can't come up with a name now, but there were a few around. But most of them were made in Connecticut and Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, that area.
Okay. Wow. Got some amazing clocks here. How about this one over here?
This is a Waterbury cottage clock. This is about 1850. This has a brass movement in it, and it's a 30-hour clock. Only runs for 30 hours, and it's also a time-only piece. And you can tell that by the winding hole that's in the dial. It has one winding hole, which tells me that it's a time-only piece.
Okay.
Whereas if you compare it to this dial, this is where your hands would be. You have two winding holes. One is for time and one is for strike.
It's like on the sessions.
The
yeah.
same thing
Yeah.
with the sessions. It's a time and strike. Now, you do occasionally see a clock that will have two winding holes in the dial, but it'll be a non-striking clock, but it'll run for 30 days.
30 days.
So they had to have 2 springs to make it run for that length of time. American clocks now.
I can't imagine having to wind a clock every 30 hours.
Mhm.
And I just have one, and I've got to say I'm really bad at remembering to wind that.
This is one of my personal clocks that I keep in the house and wind. And I'll admit, I do a pretty good job, but there are days where it has stopped.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, back then it was more in your mind to do stuff like that.
Well, yeah, because you weren't going to know what time it was.
That's right. You were totally dependent.
It was your
on keeping
timepiece.
this.
You didn't have a wristwatch or a phone in your pocket to
That's-
tell you what time
that's
it was.
right.
Now, as far as winding clocks, what was the one that went the longest after being wound? What I mean, you mentioned 30 days. You mentioned 30 hours. What kind of clock did you wind, and how long would it go?
Well, they make a 400-day clock, which
Oh.
which is it's a clock that usually is under a glass dome with 3 or 4 balls that'll turn around this way, and they've also called them anniversary clocks.
sure.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
seen those.
But
yeah.
they also made those in 1,000-day, and they're much more rare. So they would run roughly for 3 years on one wind.
So the more time, the more expensive.
Not necessarily. It all once again depends on the makers. You know, the anniversary clocks, one of the problems that I have found with those in doing repairs is they're extremely delicate. They're run off a spring that hangs down that isn't much thicker than a few pieces of hair. And when the clock is moved too much to dust around or something else,
Uh-oh.
that hair tends to break,
Uh-oh.
and then your clock stops working.
Uh-oh.
That's a very common repair I see in those.
So after the 300 days or 1,000 days or whatever, is it a rewind?
Yes, you would put a key in and wind up the spring that was in it, and it would continue
How
to
long?
run.
How long would it take to?
No, you,
A whole week, Chris.
you actually got an electric drill. And you really didn't take many turns at all, actually.
Oh, okay.
You'd be surprised. It's all through gearing. So
Okay.
it didn't necessarily mean that it was a larger spring. It may have been a lot more teeth per gear to keep it running.
It's
for that long.
amazing.
Okay.
What craftsmanship.
Oh, just unbelievable.
The
Is that-
knowledge to be able to figure it out is what impresses me.
Oh yeah.
So, and I think
Absolutely. So this is 1850.
Around
How
1850s.
far back do we go?
Well, how far back do you want to go? They made water clocks, but I don't have any here that were 1600s.
Ooh, what's this one?
This is also a Sessions. This is a flat top mantle clock. They made many different models and styles of these clocks. They made them large, slightly different shapes. Most of them were relatively flat on the top and had columns either on the front or on the sides.
I like the columns. They really bring out how the face comes out on the clock.
They made these from about 1880 till about 1930 or so.
Okay.
So for a fair span. And then this, of course, is the newest of what I call the newest of the antique clocks. And this is a tambour styled clock.
Yeah.
Most of your manufacturers, your American manufacturers, were starting to go out of business about the time that they finished up making these.
Now, how complicated is it to repair some of these things? I mean, do you have to make new parts, or can you somehow find parts?
Well, it depends on the clock once again. If it's a wooden works clock, sometimes you have to make a gear or repair a gear. Could I have that brass movement right there? I brought this just to give a looks of what typically would be inside of one of these types of clocks. And
Okay.
this is what I generally see, probably more than anything.
Okay.
And as you can see, there's lots of bits and pieces in there. But really, this clock is run in 2 sections. It has a time side and a strike side, which are almost separate. And what I have to do with this is I will pull this all apart. And each gear has 2 pivots on it. And I have to check the clock for wear. And if these are worn, I may have to put these on the lathe and file them down, or bush the holes, or both.
God, that's actually pretty heavy when I picked it up. It's mostly all brass.
And you're seeing
Yeah.
the springs on the side, like one
Yeah.
side
Yeah.
would be for the gong, and the other side would be for the time.
Time.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And that's where you get your both your winding holes in your movement.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
You're seeing these posts which are going through and winding your spring.
So that's what we're seeing right here when we're
Correct.
looking at it.
That's what you're looking
Right.
at. Yep.
Ah, okay.
What's the amount of time it takes to service a brass movement like that one there, as far as cleaning it, taking
Well,
it?
if it's in relatively good shape, it doesn't take long to take it apart. It goes through a cleaning system which I leave overnight. So, and the next morning it'll be hand cleaned in just warm soapy water, and it puts through a dryer, which dries all your parts. From there, it can take anywhere from 2 to 5 hours by the time you get it bushed and put back together and up on a test stand. But it could take longer than that. Once you get it up on a test stand, it may run for a day or may run for a little longer. It may stop, and the idea is to figure out why.
Now, when you're billing people, if you don't mind me asking this, is it like by the job, or is it depend on how many hours it takes to?
Now,
to
generally,
do this?
I have a general rule of thumb when it comes to repairing what I call a time and strike movement. This is a time and strike, and generally I charge $75 to repair this, unless it's in very poor condition or it needs a lot of bushings, and then the charge can be slightly higher.
Yeah.
But that's a general rule of thumb. So somebody brings me this clock, I can generally tell them what it's going to cost them by the time they get it back and have a warranty on it.
Okay.
When you get into something like this, as far as the repair goes, it can be quite a bit more because you don't know what you're running into.
Okay.
With these, I generally tell them it'll be, at least $100. But when I pull the movement out, if it's in very poor condition, I can give you a price, or we can go from there.
So like the woodworks, you must have there could be warping and things like that. So
Yes, they can get pretty complicated at times. So depending on the condition of the movement, you kind of have to work by sight. I have to see what's in there to really know what you can run into.
how many bushings are in the brass movements? You mentioned that sometimes you have to replace and file them down.
When they were made new, there was
Uh-huh.
no bushings in them at all.
Oh, wow.
The hole was drilled through the brass, and there generally was an oil sink on the outside to hold oil. But you could run into a clock that was in very poor condition. You might put 14 or 15 bushings in.
Yeah.
Generally, it's 3 or 4 if it's been maintained well.
Wow.
Now, how do people contact you? I know you're out on Ellis Flat, but is there phone numbers, emails?
I do. I have a phone number. I do emails. I text. That type of thing.
So this show's about you. You can
Yeah.
you could tell us if
Yeah.
you want
Yeah.
to.
Well, if they want to, if they want to contact me, my phone number is 491-7020, and my email address is northwoods and I have just lost it.
Gmail?
I've completely. What is my email? You email me.
Well, I don't know either.
It's Northwoods. It's northwoodscf@gmail.com.
I just hit the button and it comes up now. I mean, the first time I had to
Well,
learn it.
if we were a sophisticated operation here, we'd have it flashing on the screen.
That's
Right,
true.
right,
That's
right.
true.
Right.
We're working on the technology.
Definitely.
So, yeah. And you're out on if somebody wanted to call you, where do they find you?
I'm at 340 White Schoolhouse Road,
And
right in Madison.
The thing that really impressed me was that he guarantees them for a year after he repairs them. So, I mean, that takes a lot of the risk out of anything. I mean, going there and, I mean, I haven't had problems with mine, but I mean, it's kind of nice to know that, if something went wrong within a year and I mean, I have an 1800s grandfather clock that he repaired over a year ago, and that thing keeps as good a time as my laptop clock. It impresses me. And I have a question as far as on the chimes. That was something that I didn't know about. Tell us about, like, some clocks just bing, some of them gong, and some of them you hear like Westminster chimes. What's the difference, and are you able to repair all those types?
Okay. Yes, I can repair them all. And I guess the how the clock sounds was kind of up to the manufacturer what they were going for. Now, some clocks like this will strike a gong, what they call a cathedral gong. Almost sounds a little like a church bell going off or something. It's a
Okay.
nice deep sound. And they will also, lots of times, on the half hour, will hit a bell. So it'll just a little ding
Okay.
for a half hour, so you could determine whether it was a half hour or 1 o'clock.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, good.
Now, some of these clocks, like this clock here, has 2 chime rods that run this way at the bottom, and it has 2 hammers that'll hit. So, and it'll count the number of hours on the hour, and it'll strike with only 1 hammer on the half hour, so you can determine. So there's
Ah,
generally a way to
interesting.
determine whether it's a
So,
half hour
so
or
if you're
1
laying there in
o'clock.
bed at night, this would be before illuminated clocks, and you're like, oh my word, what time is it? And then you could hear bing and know
Yeah.
that it's on the 30. I mean, if you missed the first part, you're not really sure where you're at, but you can get some idea.
Well, that's an interesting topic that you just brought up about not being able to see, your clocks. And years ago, they had what they called a repeater. So just past the hour, the clock would repeat the number of hours it struck 5 past. So if you missed it, it would automatically, if you listen, oh, I didn't count that, you knew in another 5 minutes it was going to repeat it.
Oh,
and tell you.
interesting.
Huh.
That's right. So once you had gone
I've
to
got a
bed, you
wife
couldn't
like
just turn.
Sorry, hon.
So that's good, and that would make sure because you didn't have illuminated clocks back
Yeah.
then, so you couldn't just look over
That's
at
right.
night. and
Well,
see
you
it,
couldn't just
so-
turn on the light switch either. You'd have to
Yeah,
get up and
correct.
light your candle or your lamp.
your oil lamp or
Exactly.
you know,
That's
whatever
right.
you had
That's
at the
right.
time,
That's
so-
right. Your newspaper, whatever.
So-
No newspaper would.
So what about cuckoo clocks? I mean, that's like a whole different creature, isn't it? I mean, you've got moving parts coming out at you and hooting and bellows and
Have you worked on any of those?
Oh yes, yes.
Okay,
I do
okay.
cuckoo clocks as well. And you're right. It's a whole different clock altogether. Inside, how it gets its sound is what they call bellows in there, and at the top, they have bellow tops, which are covered. And when the clock starts to strike, they open.
Yeah.
Which when they open and they close, they force air out through a whistle.
like the
basically.
old pump
oh,
That's how
I see.
you can get a cuckoo. Like
I
that.
see.
Oh.
Yeah, yeah.
So they're a whole different animal. Sometimes you find that those bellow tops, the paper around them have gone bad in the old clocks. The
Okay.
newer ones, not so much. It's made out of a much better material that lasts a long time. The real old material deteriorated from age, but they can all be recovered. And I prefer to recover them. You can buy new ones, but if I have an antique clock come in, I don't want to put new bellow tops on it. So
Mhm.
I'll recover them so they're original pieces in the clock.
How many clocks are you working on at any one time?
Well, right after Christmas, I had about 22 in for
No
repair, but I only work on 2 or 3 at one time. After a while, you have them in too many stages or too many parts apart, so I tend to finish 2 or 3 and then move on to some
So
more.
you've got a regular daytime job, and then when
Yeah.
you're done that, this is a nighttime thing for
That's
you,
right.
pretty much.
Evenings, weekends, whenever I can find the time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
find the time.
Find
Yeah,
the
that's
time.
appropriate.
No
huh?
pun.
That's right. So,
Yeah. That's what we got? What's this one right here?
that is a woodworks movement that is interesting, and everybody was trying to develop something new, something different. And as you can see with this woodworks movement here, it's more of a rectangular, shape. It's almost square, but not quite. And where you would wind your holes are fairly close together on the dial. With this movement, this was called an east-west movement because the clock movement runs from east to west
Yep.
rather than, and the winding arbors are very far apart. So if you were to see this similar type of clock someplace, and you notice that the winding arbors were here about 9 and 3, way out here, you would know that it had an east-west movement in it versus more of a normal
Okay.
movement. They still operate the same way, but it's just something different, something for them to hang their hat on and say we've developed something that was a little bit different.
How old is that, roughly?
Now, all these are roughly probably from 1818 to about 1830, somewhere in that
That's
range.
amazing.
So you go back how far? I mean, you you take on all comers. It sounds like.
Yeah, and it's not just antique clocks. There's a lot of modern clocks out there today, and there's a lot of them from all over the world. You have clocks made in China and Korea and all over the place that are here, and they all at some point need servicing. So I service any mechanical clock. I will service.
Okay.
I guess that's the easiest way to say it. No matter where it was made.
Well, if you've gotten any clocks in that kind of stumped you as to how they work.
Yes, and it not how they work, because most of them, no matter where they were made, operate in a similar fashion. But sometimes you'll get them in that they just don't want to keep time, or they run for a week and then all of a sudden stop. And sometimes those are a little bit of a head scratcher, but there's always a solution. It's just a matter of finding it. So it doesn't, I'm learning, because no matter how long you've been doing this, you'll have a clock that'll come in that'll throw a problem at you that you've never seen before. And I think that's part of why I really like it, because I can.
It's like a detective thing.
Yeah, you're a problem solver.
Well,
Yeah.
by the time I finally get it to run and go out the door, I was like, I'm proud of the fact that I
Sure.
was able to figure that out. And the other part with this is preserving history. And when you
Yes.
can take a clock that's 130 years old, or a 200-year-old grandfather clock, and make it run as though it did when it was brand new, it's preserving history is what it is.
So is most of your business now word of mouth, or is it do you do any sort of advertising?
I do a little bit of advertising, but not really. Basically what happened, a little bit of background, my father, when I was working with my father, he was doing all the repair work, and I wasn't taking on any repair work because I didn't want to interrupt what he was doing. He passed away in July, and when he did, I kind of took over the clock business. The people that were coming in for him to repair clocks, and so I was kind of thrust into this all of a sudden. It wasn't quite ready, but in the process of making a sign to hang out in front of the house and those types of things. So it's a slow process, because I'm busy. It's hard to find the time to once again find the time.
I'll brag him up just a little bit, Chris, because he is an incredible carpenter as well. I mean, the finished furniture. I mean, just seeing his wood shop is amazing. But his dad. I mean, just talking with him, I've learned how much his father meant to him, and he actually made a case. It was a clock case for his dad that he was buried in.
Yeah, as an urn.
And
My goodness! Yeah.
it was just so beautiful,
Nice.
to see. And they had a picture of his dad's clock shop that they put in there as well. So
That's
pretty
very
impressive.
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, very nice. Well, we discussed all the clocks here. Did we? Is there
only
one
one-
over on the other side there or we got them all?
I
No,
think
I think
the only one we haven't discussed.
Oh,
I guess,
over here.
is the OG
Over here.
So,
you wanna
I can slide some of this back if you.
breaking anything?
Well, I'm sure you can.
That one's as tall as you, Chris.
Yeah, no kidding. Center.
They call it OG because it hurts your back when you pick it up. Oh, gee, I should have left that.
Do you
where
want to?
it
You want to
was.
step out in front?
Sure,
you might have to
sure,
with this
sure.
one.
This is what they call an OG. This would have followed the more transitional clocks, and they were very popular. Some people would put them on a shelf, or they would hang them on a wall, so they could be used both ways.
Because they're so. Can you kind of turn it sideways to show people how thin these clocks are? Because it didn't take much of a shelf to fit something that enormous on or a mantle. So
you're right.
that's pretty impressive.
This particular OG is a very tall OG, and it's tall for a reason. This one runs for 8 days. Most of your OGs only ran for about 30 hours.
Okay.
But in order to, they could have done some of it through gearing, and they did, but in order to get their weights to run for 8 days, they increased the size of the clock. The
Makes
reason,
sense.
in most of you can identify most of your OGs as an 8-day because it'll have 2 doors.
Yeah.
Now this one in particular doesn't have 2 doors. It has one door that has 2 knobs. They gave it the appearance of 2 doors. But the neat part about this clock, and the reason I brought it, was the movement inside. This is at a time when brass was very expensive. And instead of making an entire brass movement and punching holes in the plates, they took brass strips and they riveted it all together. And
Oh, wow.
they made what they call a brass strapped movement. And it was only done by a few makers. But that's how they saved on brass, and that's why I brought this clock, was to show that it's a very interesting piece.
How old a clock is this again?
I think this one was 1838.
1838.
Yeah.
And OG is what? Is that the name of the company or
No, it's a style.
style?
It's referring to this style right
the
here.
molding.
To the molding. You see it in mirrors and everything else.
Old
It would be
homes.
OG mirrors, old homes.
And OG
Yes.
stands for.
I do not know the answer. to that.
I believe I know that one.
Ah.
It's the type of molding. It's called an OG molding.
Oh.
You'll see this same molding around windows and doors. So I'm.
Do you know where the lettering OG comes from?
It's in the alphabet.
So you had the same answer I did.
You're not supposed to ask me
Thank
questions.
goodness we've got Jamie around.
Exactly. Keep things light here. Yeah.
Oh, that's neat.
That's an amazing clock.
So impressive.
Yeah.
Which this door would have had a reverse painting similar to that one, but a very large one. Of course, it's missing the OG, the reverse painting in there. Sometimes you would also see them with mercury back mirrors in there.
Okay. Wow.
So.
And they had their advertisements right in there as
Yep,
well,
the clock
right?
paper. And actually, the clock paper that you see inside would have given you some setup directions, who made it, where it was made. See, this says 8-day on it. Some of them use the same paper for multiple clocks, so it might say 8-day and 30-hour. So
Okay.
you couldn't always go by that paper to
Oh,
tell you
okay,
how long the
okay.
clock would run.
Okay.
But this clock paper that's on here is very important to value of clocks.
Okay.
If that paper is missing or in very poor condition, it will lower the value of the clock.
Wow.
If it's in really, because it gives you so much information.
What would you say the value of this clock is?
In the condition it's in, because of the type of movement that's in there, maybe $125. But if all the veneer was in nice shape, and because of the maker, if it had, the original reverse painting in it, it probably would be more of a $325 clock, which is a high price for an OG clock. But because, like I said, because of the maker and the style of movement.
Wow.
Now, I know you repair clocks. Are you a collector of clocks as well?
I am, yes. I have a number of Woodworks clocks and some unusual pieces that I collect as well.
Well, this is quite amazing.
What was neat to me was to have somebody local to know. I mean, my own case, having purchased a grandfather clock, an antique one, because I liked the looks of it, didn't know anything about them, and lo and behold, it's set in a corner in our parlor for 6-7 years, and just happened to be looking through Craigslist on antique clocks, and I'm like, wow, this guy fixes clocks, and to have him come right over the house, he takes the clocks down, sets them up, and shows you, what to do with them, what not to do with them, because it's a lost art, really. I mean, never move a clock. I mean, I've learned the hard way. Don't move clocks with the pendulums on them. Don't overwind the clocks. Learn as you go.
So you're getting calls from all over Central Maine? I mean, do you travel a lot to people's individual homes? to
I
look at them?
generally only travel for tall case clocks, your grandfather clocks, your grandmother clocks, and even granddaughter clocks. Cases that are too large to
Sure.
move. Then I'll come and I'll take all the works out of them, pendulum, weights, movements. I bring them back to the house, redo them, and then install them. But when it comes to this type of clock or anything that's movable, people generally bring them to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's impressed me is to see, like, the grandfather clocks when he's repairing them. I mean, it's literally a little wooden shelf that he has, so you're seeing this enormous piece of furniture in your home, when in fact they don't need any of that. All he needs is he'll open up the door, take the bonnet off, and then take out the mechanism with the weights, then brings it home, sets it on those, and does all the work from there. So it's
Ah,
kind
I
of neat.
see.
You don't need
Oh,
the whole
good. So
thing.
you're not hauling this huge clock.
That's
over.
correct.
Okay. All
I
right.
just take all the weights and stuff out of it.
So it's
Okay.
pretty neat to know that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. Very good. Well, I think we've shown every
I think
clock
we've-
in
yeah.
our possession. Do we want to move these out of the
Sure,
way?
let's do that.
Sit down
Put this
again.
right back in.
I'd rather just sit down and let him move them.
Yeah. Very interesting. Do you want to, I know you came out here to talk about clocks, but do you want to talk a little bit about the other part of your business too?
I can.
I'm
But
gonna leave
the
room.
contact information is completely different. No, it,
No.
it really is.
Yeah, don't give him my number.
I build furniture for a living. That's how I make my living, and it's mostly hardwood furniture. Anything from an end table to a bed, a nightstand. If you name it, I've probably built it at one time or another. I've been doing it for about 24 years.
Incredible dining room tables, I mean, and the chairs to go with them. I mean, the stuff that he makes is beautiful. So, very impressive carpenter.
Any particular styles of
I do a lot of shaker style,
Shaker, okay, yeah.
because it tends to be very popular. Still.
It is.
And that seems what most people want. But I have made, trestles, and I built pedestal tables. So they're really what I like to tell people is, if you come with an idea, even a few pictures, and you say, I like this idea, and I like this idea, and I like this idea, and we can kind of combine them and go from there.
Now, do you just build on demand, or do you occasionally build a number of things and then try to sell them?
I haven't had time to build anything
I am in so much trouble.
to display in probably about 6 years. So everything is built. Everything that I built has already been sold, and right now I'm really booking into July. So
Very good. Very good.
So if people are willing to wait, I'm available.
There you go.
But it is a considerable wait time.
And by the way, folks, he did not come on this show to discuss this, but
That's right.
what the heck, you're fair game. Anyone who comes on the
Hey,
show,
That is true,
I'm
Chris.
ready.
That's-
I'm ready.
I like that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, Jamie,
Yes.
do you? We have a. Anybody who's watched Keeping Pace in the past knows that we often go off script and we do some different things, and some of them are entertaining, and some are mere attempts at being entertaining. But we try to do a few different things, and some. I mean, there have been days that we've talked about the Red Sox baseball season. I notice he's got a Red Sox
Oh, yeah.
cap
I'm
on.
prepared for the season to
Spring
start.
training. What's your prediction, by the way? Any?
Another World Series. I mean, how can you look at it any differently?
What about their relief pitching?
Well, I'm going to say they made it through most of their season without much last year and still won a World Series, so I'm hoping for the best.
Okay, they have not re-signed Kimbrel, and are they going to be able to get by without that?
Well, we'll see. but I'm still hopeful. And I say,
It's good to be hopeful.
that's right.
So there's the baseball portion of our show.
There we go. There we
I
go.
saw his cap, and I said I gotta talk about that. That's kind of a passion of mine too. And so Jamie brought something with him that I had a chance to peruse before the show started, and it's actually very humorous.
It is.
At least
It's-
we find it to be humorous.
Yeah.
We'll see if the audience does. So, Jamie, why don't you try these?
All right. Well, the humorous part's going to be that I had to bring my assistant's blue glasses in because I couldn't find my own readers today. So, but I actually found this in my door this morning when I go to work. And being a recreation director, there's always laughter around me, and jokes are always coming at me. That not all of them I would share, but this one was fine. So I'll just kind of preface it by reading the header. It said a first grade school teacher had 26 students in her class. I didn't actually, probably won't share all 26, but I highlighted some of the ones that I thought were really kind of cute. So to the 26 students in her class, she presented each child in her classroom the first half of a well-known proverb and asked them to come up with the remainder of the proverb. Now, in reading this, she says it's hard to believe that these were actually done by first graders. So I'll start off. It's always darkest before daylight savings time. Never underestimate the power of termites. Don't bite the hand that looks dirty.
Good advice to live by.
That's right.
It's too bad we couldn't insert a laugh track on this show too. You know?
I could, yeah, that would be perfect. Can you do that? He can build anything. I don't know about that though. A miss is as good as a mister. No news is impossible. If you lie down with dogs, you'll stink in the morning. The pen is mightier than the pigs. I love this one. An idle mind is the best way to relax. Where there's smoke, there's pollution. Happy the bride who gets all the presents. A penny saved is not much. Two's company, three's the musketeers. Don't put off till tomorrow what you can put on to go to bed with. Laugh and the whole world laughs with you. Cry and you'll have to blow your nose. Children, this one's funny. Children should be seen and not spanked or grounded. There's wishful thinking. If at first you don't succeed, get new batteries. Everything has batteries and it's powered out. When the blind lead the blind, get out of the way. And the last one being, a bird in the hand is going to poop on you. I just thought that those were so cute.
Well, there's our comedy section.
Yes, that's right. That's right. So thank you to whoever put that in my door this morning, along with the other literature.
Well,
All right.
what else would you like to talk about here?
Oh, well, what about the weather? I mean, it's been so cold.
Yeah,
You know, the last storms we've had, my wife, she couldn't take her eyes off the window.
yeah.
Finally, I decided to let her in. I use that joke every morning at work. I'm just telling you, it's awesome.
Well, I certainly cold it has been, and not only cold, but extremely windy. And let me tell you, this winter has been.
It's long enough.
Yeah, we haven't even reached the end of February yet, and it's been one of the longest winters it seems as though we've had in a while. And I don't know about global warming, but maybe we can call it climate change. And climate change to me seems to mean more extremes.
I get such a kick out of looking on the side of the road. I mean, we live on Route 43 in Starks, and they've had to have bucket loaders pushing the snow up because we're in the middle of open fields, and the snow is drifting right into the roads, and the buckets have been trying to push the snow back, and they've got to be 16, 18 feet high, you know, where they've had to push it, and the snow is still going over and drifting into the road.
Well,
It's
I feel
amazing.
bad for the road crews this year because I'd seen an article recently that they've gone through most of their salt and sand supplies already, and it's just been
Yeah.
a brutal winter in a lot of different ways. Maybe some of you noticed the at the top of Sugarloaf yesterday, the
Communications.
communication
Blew down.
tower went down
Yep.
just like that.
It's unbelievable.
And that communication tower, I believe, I ski some at Sugarloaf. Now, I believe that communications tower's been there for quite a few years. And amazing. 171 mile an hour wind gust. at the top of Mount Washington.
Yeah, that's even hard to imagine.
And where I live on Bigelow Hill, I don't know what it was, but everything was blowing sideways up there for
Unreal.
basically 2 days.
Yep.
So we've had some really amazingly tough weather.
Well,
this
I
winter.
am. If there's one thing to be thankful for, that last snow that we got before this wind was just mealy enough where it's moving it around, but it's not moving it feet at a time.
Yeah.
Now, if we had had a really light, fluffy snow,
Yeah.
it would have been very difficult with the the view driving down the road. And,
Yeah, this winter's been tough. Makes you want to just stay inside and work on clocks.
yeah, right. Absolutely.
Or just buy them online to have him fixed,
Absolutely.
which is my vice. But
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. So this has been a very tough winter season for sure.
Definitely.
So, although the days are getting longer, and daylight savings time is,
right there, set right by the
Is-
children. That's right. It's
That's
always
right.
darkest before
so you
daylight.
got to set those old clocks ahead
Mm-hmm.
for coming time.
That's right.
So, any other things that you'd like to, or other clocks that you'd like to mention?
Maybe not necessarily clocks, I guess, but the one thing about the clock business, one thing that I don't think I have mentioned is that I do sell clocks as well. So
Okay.
if somebody saw something or thought they would like to have an antique clock, I do have a collection of them, and I do sell them as well. So it's not just repair work; it's also, if somebody's interested in one, and if they find a style they like, and I don't happen to have, I generally can find one.
Okay.
So I also buy a few too. Occasionally, sometimes people will buy them at a lawn sale, and then they don't really want to put $75 into them, because they thought it would be very inexpensive. And sometimes I'll buy them from them, that type of thing. Or if you find one in your attic or
How
something.
often do you
like
see
that.
them out in flea markets and things like
Oh,
that?
you see them. You see them. Sometimes they are for the clock repairman because they're in such poor condition nobody else would buy them. But and I do buy them in just about any condition because you can't repair old clocks without parts. You do need parts.
Now, when you're trying to locate clocks, I mean, somebody comes to you and says, "I want a 100-year-old cuckoo clock or something." You don't have it on hand. I mean, where do you? Is there a particular clock market out there that you
Well,
go to?
not necessarily, but I've gotten to know quite a few antique dealers and other people like that that deal in clocks and other things, and you make connections with other people who are into clocks or have clocks to sell. Generally, I can find them by locating that. Not always, but
A lot of
generally.
auctions too.
Auctions
they
as
come up a
well.
lot.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Do you have are there any big auction places that or you're just talking about general local auction
Yeah.
sites where
Yeah,
you
just
go to?
just general auction places. Sometimes I'll be looking through what they have, and if they have a number of clocks that makes it worth traveling, we go to there, or that type of thing. Yeah, yeah.
In your spare time.
In my spare time,
Yeah.
I generally will find time to deal with clocks. It's really a passion. So it's
Now you also have sheep at your house.
very few, but
Very
yes, we
few.
do have a few sheep. Yes,
It's got
yes.
two wonderful children. One's going to be graduating from high school soon, and one's in college.
One's in college now. Yeah, yeah.
Tell us a little bit about them and their sheep there.
Yeah,
I mean-
they were both in 4-H
Okay.
since
Makes
they were old enough to show sheep.
Yeah.
My mother, their grandmother had sheep for as long as I can remember, so they had to have sheep. So we had a few sheep at the house, and the next thing I know, we had 54 of them. But since my oldest daughter is now in college and my youngest one is graduating this year, that number has really dwindled. So it's really their passion. They really enjoy it. So
Where's your oldest going to college?
she's down in New Hampshire, in Concord at NHTI.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
And you're going to have another one in college for long?
Yep, and she's going in the opposite direction. She's headed to Presque Isle.
Oh,
So
likes the winters, huh?
Well, somebody mentioned that to her. They get a lot of snow, and she said, "Well, I don't have to shovel it."
Yeah, good
And
point.
she has a good point there.
Good.
So the sidewalks will be clear for her to go to class. So yeah,
Then you'll be experiencing empty nest syndrome, right?
that's correct. Yeah, and of course they both had to go in opposite directions. One 3.5 hours one way, and
Wow.
one 3.5 hours the other way. So yeah, that'll be interesting.
Well, one weekend you go one direction, the other weekend you go
Well,
the
that's
other
that's
direction.
what we figured. That's
Just
right.
gotta have
That's
equity
right.
in that
So,
situation,
yeah,
so.
yeah.
No, absolutely.
and it's been a while since I've been on. And my son, Sterling, he had since graduated Orono. He majored in sustainable agriculture and minored in plant science, and then kind of decided that wasn't his thing. So he's in the Air Force now, and he's stationed overseas right now.
Oh
so,
my.
and just some tidbits from Sterling, for an example of temperatures. He tells me that the barrack, the room that he stays in, they actually put aluminum foil in the windows to keep the heat out.
Yeah.
And there are no vehicles, so well, at least that are open for them. So they have to. He said he has to bike 2 miles to get where the lunch is or the evening meal, and it's kind of like a trailer that you would hook onto the back of a truck, and you're served out of those. No vegetation anywhere. Just and he is very anxious to be coming home in May. So
Oh my
been
goodness.
missing him awful, but he'll have been in for about 6 years. So
So it gets really intensely hot.
I can't
hard.
even fathom. Yep.
Yeah.
So he's
Oh my
missing home
goodness.
awful, but just
Wow.
turned 30.
Turn. Oh.
Yeah.
Boy, you're older than I thought, Jamie.
Well, I thank you, Chris. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. What happens when they think your wife is your daughter and your mother is your sister? Yeah, it seems to come as I start creeping there. Yeah,
Oh man. Well, time flies.
it sure does. It sure does.
I'm sure I don't have children, but you two do, and I'm sure the years have flown by.
That's why you look so young, Chris. You don't have the.
Yeah. Despite all the gray hair, yeah. That's right. Yeah. So yeah, time does fly.
It does.
Does fly by. And particularly when you're as busy as you are.
But I like being busy. I'm not a sitter. It's hard for me to stay idle for any length of time. I like to keep my mind busy and my hands busy, and so.
And you are certainly doing it. There's no question about it. And yeah, I think we all probably stay fairly busy in one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not quite as busy as I once was, but I'm still reasonably busy anyways.
Sure.
So, well, anything else?
We've been busy at Cedar Ridge, and I know the Madison station was there recently. We had a malt shop week there where we were fortunate that Betty Vining came and taped our Elvis performer that we had, and we set up our activity area for malt shop for the whole week, so that was a lot of fun.
By the way, Jamie is activities director
Yeah.
right, at Cedar Ridge
Yeah,
Nursing
that's
Home.
right. That's right. Been
It's
there for
gotta
10
be-
years now, so there you go for time flying, and been at Maple Crest 15 years prior to that, but so yeah.
See, those years are adding up. So
They
he
are.
he is older than what I thought he was.
I'm 50
yeah.
years old, Chris. That's right. But yeah, 25 years having fun, and I gotta say it's a great job. So
Oh, absolutely. You get and you don't work with her now, but you work with Donna Finley, one of our other co-hosts here.
Donna Finley's my second mom. Well, I have 2 or 3 second moms, but she's right up there, in the level of one of my favorite second moms. I miss working with Donna, but we still keep in touch and we still go out to eat. And I'm not gonna share why she isn't here today. I'll let her do that. But yeah,
You know what's going to happen now, Jamie, because we brought this up and alluded to it.
that's what I'm hoping for.
And people watch this show, they're going to be calling Donna and saying, "What is going on?"
I know, and I hope they do. Oh my, yeah, that's a story that she'll have to share.
Yeah. Well, what we're in hopes for next time we're on with Keeping Pace, we will have both Donna Finley and Darla Pickett back with us on the show, and as well as Jamie. And we'll have to get Katie Willett back. Katie, in the winter time, it's a little difficult for her to get out and up the hill. Anyone who knows where Katie lives in East Madison, there is quite a hill from her house, from the lake up to the road, and it's a bit difficult
Treacherous.
to navigate, particularly after a bunch of snowstorms with ice and stuff that we've had.
Definitely.
So we're hoping that we will have her back next month, assuming March is a little easier on us than February has been.
Knock on wood.
Knock on wood. So we have managed to fill up the whole hour with 45 minutes of very interesting topic, and we pieced together the other 15.
Yeah, we had to do that a little bit without the ladies' help.
That's right. That's right. But we thank all of you for tuning in this morning, and Gordon, thank you very much.
Definitely.
I mean, your topic was very, very interesting.
And I thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you need your antique clock repaired, here's the man to do it right here. So thank you.
Thank you all.
And thank you for joining us on Keeping Pace.